After my husband's funeral, his sister looked me in the eye and said, his 15-year marriage was completely fake. He was already married to someone else. She handed me $50,000 and told me to disappear quietly, or everyone would know I was just a mistress. So, I took the money and signed her papers. But what she didn't know was that the revenge I planned would send the entire family to federal prison. But before I tell you exactly what happened, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the incredible stories we share here. Have you subscribed yet? Thank you for being part of our community. My name is Elena Martinez, and for 15 years, I genuinely believed I was living a fairy tale in Miami's most exclusive circles. At 42, I was a successful forensic documents analyst who pivoted to luxury interior architecture, a field where my meticulous eye for detail and uncompromising artistic vision flourished. David Lombardo, my husband, was the charismatic face of Lombardo Luxury Properties, and together, we built an empire. We didn't just construct buildings. We sculpted dreams. Our Mediterranean-style condominiums redefined South Beach's skyline, each with my signature touch, from imported Italian marble lobbies to hand-painted ceiling murals that had art collectors in awe and billionaires vying for a piece of our vision. Our Coral Gables mansion, a testament to my design prowess, graced the pages of Architectural Digest twice, drawing celebrities from across the globe to admire my work. I genuinely believed we were partners in every sense of the word. In love, in business, in life itself. I was wrong about everything. The morning of David's funeral arrived with an uncharacteristic chill for Miami in March. A heavy blanket of gray clouds clinging to the sky over Woodlawn Cemetery like a shroud of bad omens. David had died suddenly, brutally, of a heart attack at 51. One moment he was there, a vibrant force of nature. The next, he was gone, leaving me shattered, adrift, and utterly unprepared for the storm that was about to break. As I stood beside his open grave, my black Chanel dress a stark contrast to the verdant lawn, watching them lower the casket that held my 15 years of perceived happiness, I couldn't shake the unnerving sense of isolation. David's family, the formidable Lombardo clan, stood deliberately apart, a palpable distance between their tight-knit circle and my grieving silhouette. Victoria, David's older sister and the family's ice-cold corporate lawyer, shot me unsettling glances throughout the service, her usually impeccably coiffed blonde hair slightly disheveled by the coastal breeze, her blue eyes sharp with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Was it pity? Accusation? Or perhaps something far more sinister? Marcus, David's younger brother, who oversaw our construction crews, wouldn't even meet my gaze, his face a mask of carefully constructed indifference. I tried to rationalize it, attributing their aloofness to a different grieving process. The Lombardos had always been more reserved, more stoic than my warm, boisterous Cuban family. But a knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach, a premonition of something deeply unsettling. After the priest's final, hollow blessing, I turned towards the awaiting limousine, expecting to join the family on the ride to the reception at our country club. Victoria intercepted me mid-stride, her perfectly manicured hand clamping onto my elbow with surprising, almost aggressive, force. Her grip was cold, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd always associated with family comfort. "Elena, we need to talk," she stated, her voice devoid of the usual saccharine condolences, carrying an edge I'd never heard before. Her gaze, usually sharp and calculating, held a glint I couldn't quite place. "Not here, not in front of everyone. Come to the office tomorrow morning at 9. There are some legal matters we need to discuss about David's estate." The way she lingered on legal matters, her tone laced with a chilling emphasis, sent a tremor of anxiety through me. My stomach clenched, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry, assuming she referred to the usual probate procedures, inheritance paperwork, and business transitions that inevitably follow a sudden death. Victoria released my arm abruptly, and walked away without another word, leaving me standing utterly alone beside the fresh, empty grave, watching as the cemetery workers, with grim efficiency, began their task of filling the earth. It was a stark, solitary moment that felt like the beginning of an end. That night, sleep was a cruel stranger. Our king-sized bed, adorned with the finest Egyptian cotton sheets and a custom-designed headboard I'd personally curated to complement our opulent master suite, felt vast and empty, mocking my solitude. Everything in our sprawling Coral Gables mansion, every meticulously designed corner, felt subtly altered, as if David's absence had not just left a void, but had also, unsettlingly, exposed unseen cracks in the very foundation of my life. I drifted aimlessly through the marble-floored foyer, past the grand spiral staircase with its wrought iron railings imported from Barcelona, a masterpiece of craftsmanship I'd personally overseen, and found myself in David's dimly lit study. This was his sanctuary, the place where he'd spent countless late nights. The clatter of his keyboard and the murmur of his phone calls a familiar soundtrack to our shared life. His expansive mahogany desk remained cluttered, a chaotic tableau of papers, coffee-stained contracts, and his cherished Mont Blanc pen, the very one I'd gifted him for our 10th anniversary. A desperate need to feel close to him, to grasp at something tangible in my swirling grief, compelled me to organize his documents. I hoped to find some comfort in the mundane, perhaps even a sense of preparation for the ominous legal matters Victoria had promised. It was during this almost sacred ritual, a quiet act of remembrance, that my fingers brushed against something hidden, a manila envelope tucked discreetly behind his computer monitor. My heart hammered against my ribs, an irrational premonition tightening its grip. Emblazoned on its front, in David's unmistakable, familiar handwriting, were the words, "personal, confidential." The words themselves seemed to hum with a forbidden energy, drawing me in. A cold chill snaked down my spine, a whisper of dread that quickly grew into a roar. Inside the envelope, my hands began to tremble uncontrollably, the documents shaking so violently I nearly dropped them. The world tilted on its axis. What stared back at me were not routine business papers, but a marriage certificate dated April 15th, 1998, meticulously detailing the union between David Michael Lombardo and a name that ripped through my consciousness like a jagged knife. Isabella Rodriguez. My breath hitched in my throat, a silent scream building in my chest. Our marriage certificate, the one framed in antique silver in our bedroom, the one I had cherished as a symbol of our unwavering love, was dated June 22nd, 2009, a staggering 11 years later. My mind raced, grappling with the impossible, desperately trying to construct a rational explanation. Isabella Rodriguez. The name echoed in my head. Foreign and sharp. I had never, not once in 15 years, heard that name. According to these pristine, official-looking papers, David had been legally married to this woman for over 2 decades, a shocking revelation that spanned our entire relationship. My marriage certificate, the one I believed was sacred, was now, definitively, worthless. I stumbled into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine with trembling hands, and called my sister Carmen, tears finally, uncontrollably, streaming down my face. "Mija, you need to calm down," she tried to soothe, her voice laced with concern after I incoherently blurted out my discovery. There has to be an explanation. Maybe he was divorced and never mentioned it. Maybe the papers are old and outdated. But deep in my heart, a place where denial couldn't reach, I already knew the truth was going to be much, much worse. The conference room, with its pristine mahogany table and panoramic views of Biscayne Bay, suddenly felt like a suffocating cage, spinning wildly around me. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, desperately trying to steady myself as Victoria's words echoed and re-echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my carefully constructed reality. 15 years as a mistress. The phrase was a brand, searing itself onto my soul, 15 years of what I had believed was an unwavering, true marriage, a life meticulously built together, dreams woven into the fabric of our shared existence. I thought of our whispered plans for retirement, the joyous, foolish talks of renewing our vows on our 20th anniversary, a milestone that would now never arrive. A sickening wave of nausea washed over me. Suddenly, 1,000 fragmented memories, once dismissed as quirks or innocent oversights, clicked into place with horrifying precision. David's frequent, often vaguely defined, business trips to Key West, his insistence on personally handling all of Lombardo Properties' complex legal paperwork, shielding me from the intricacies, his strangely evasive demeanor whenever I'd playfully suggested updating our wills or engaging in comprehensive estate planning. "This can't be real," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, hoarse and broken. But the truth, cold and undeniable, was already setting in. His insistence on separate bank accounts, always framed as savvy business practice. The way he'd skillfully changed the subject whenever I, aching for motherhood, brought up having children. Even his family's perpetual, subtle distance, which I'd always attributed to their reserved nature, now appeared as a deliberate, calculated politeness, a veneer over a much darker truth. Victoria watched me process this agonizing torrent of information, her expression a chilling mix of professional detachment and what I now recognized, with a jolt of stark clarity, as barely concealed contempt. "No, it's very real," Victoria continued, her voice cutting through the thick silence as she opened yet another folder with the chilling efficiency of someone who had meticulously planned this conversation for years. Her movements were precise, almost surgical. "Isabella has been receiving monthly payments from David's estate for over 2 decades, along with full health insurance and a very comfortable lifestyle in the Keys. She's David's true legal widow, Elena, and as such, she's legally entitled to 50% of everything David owned. That includes this company, Lombardo Luxury Properties, all its assets, all the properties, and yes, even the house you've been living in." She slid a stack of documents across the table towards me. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies, all bearing Isabella's name right alongside David's. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking, unfathomable. "The good news for you," Victoria added, her voice chillingly devoid of genuine empathy, "is that Isabella has no interest in actually running a business or living in Miami. She's agreed to sell her shares back to the family for a fair market price, which means the company stays in Lombardo hands." Her gaze bore into mine, cold and triumphant. "The bad news is that leaves you with exactly nothing. You were never legally entitled to anything in the first place, Elena. Your status was never more than a romantic entanglement for David, a convenient arrangement." My throat felt like sandpaper, raw and constricted, as I tried desperately to swallow the bitter truth. My vision blurred, hot tears threatening to overflow, but I fiercely refused to let Victoria see me break. Not now, not ever. I finally found my voice, though it came out as a raspy, broken whisper. "What about the work I've done? 15 years of designing, building this company from the ground up, bringing in crucial clients, creating the entire aesthetic, the very brand identity that made Lombardo Properties famous." My voice rose slightly, edged with desperation and outrage. Victoria's laugh was sharp, humorless, a grating sound like breaking glass that echoed in the sterile room. "You were an employee, Elena, a very well-compensated employee who happened to sleep with the boss, nothing more. Every design you created, every client relationship you meticulously built, every innovative concept you brought to this company, it all belongs to Lombardo Properties. Not to you, personally." Her words were calculated, designed to dismantle my self-worth, piece by painful piece. "Did you really think David, a man already legally married, would ever give you legal ownership of anything?" She slid a thick, imposing contract across the polished table, its pages rustling ominously. My name, Elena Martinez, was printed at the bottom alongside a daunting signature line. "This," Victoria declared, her voice now flat and authoritative, "is a non-disclosure agreement and a severance package. You sign this, you get $50,000 due, and you disappear quietly from Miami society. You don't contact our clients, you don't badmouth the company, and you definitely don't tell anyone about Isabella or the circumstances of your arrangement with David. $50,000 for 15 years of my life, for helping build a company now valued at over $200 million. It was a paltry, insulting sum. I had personally designed projects that generated more revenue than that in a single month. But as my numb fingers traced the clauses of the document, a chilling realization dawned. Victoria wasn't just buying my silence, she was orchestrating my professional destruction if I dared to resist. The contract contained insidious clauses about industrial espionage and theft of proprietary designs, legal traps meticulously crafted to obliterate my career in architecture forever. "If you don't sign," Victoria stated, her voice calm but laced with venom, "I will ensure that every major firm in South Florida, every influential client, knows you as a thief and a fraud. Word will spread that you stole designs, claimed credit for work that rightfully belonged to others, that you are unreliable and problematic. Your professional reputation, painstakingly built over 2 decades, will be utterly obliterated overnight. You'll be professionally radioactive." "You're blackmailing me," I said, my voice barely a whisper, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. Victoria merely shrugged, a gesture of casual indifference that suggested this was the most natural, unremarkable thing in the world. "I'm protecting my family's business interests," she replied smoothly, glancing at her gold Rolex with practiced nonchalance. "Look, Elena, I actually feel sorry for you. David was selfish and cruel to let this charade go on for so long, and I told him years ago that it would end badly, but that's not my problem anymore. And it's certainly not Isabella's problem. She's the legal widow. She gets the life insurance money, the property, and the respect that comes with being David's actual wife. You get a generous severance package and the chance to start over somewhere else with your dignity intact." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes studying me with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. "Miami's architecture scene is pretty small, Elena. Word travels fast about who's reliable and who's problematic. Sign the papers, take the money, and move on with your life. Don't sign them, and I guarantee you'll never work in this city again." That afternoon, I drove home to what I now understood was not our Coral Gables mansion, but David's mansion, a home I had unwittingly occupied illegally for 15 years. I walked through rooms I had designed with such love and meticulous care, each elegant detail now twisting into a monument to my own staggering stupidity, my profound naivety. The hand-painted dining room ceiling, a painstaking labor of love that had consumed 3 months of my life to plan and execute. The custom kitchen with its Italian marble countertops, a space where David and I had cooked countless meals, sharing laughter and dreams. The master bathroom, a sanctuary of luxury with its rainfall shower and heated floors, where we had talked about growing old together, our future stretching out like an endless horizon. Every beautiful detail, every cherished memory, felt like a cruel, irrefutable piece of evidence, proof of how thoroughly I had been deceived, how completely my reality had been a mirage. I sank onto the plush sofa in our living room, staring blankly out at the serene canal through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time since David's death, I allowed myself to truly cry, not for him, but for myself. For the woman who, at 42 years old, had believed in fairy tales, who had trusted completely and loved unconditionally, only to discover she had been living someone else's meticulously crafted lie. The shame, the humiliation, the raw, searing pain of it all threatened to consume me. By evening, the the torrent of grief had receded, leaving behind a cold, sharp shard of anger and an unwavering clarity. I was devastated, yes, but not defeated. A new resolve, cold and unyielding, began to crystallize within me. I would sign Victoria's papers, take her insulting $50,000, and disappear from Miami, just like she wanted. I would play the role of the humiliated mistress, the discarded fool. But as I sat at David's vast mahogany desk, the very place where he had concocted his elaborate deceptions, reading through Victoria's damning contract one more time, my eyes scanned the fine print, the legal jargon that once fascinated me, now a weapon. And then, there it was. A clause, overlooked by Victoria in her smug haste, that gleamed like a hidden gem. Clause 14, requiring the disclosure of all relevant financial documents and business records related to my work with the company. Victoria had been so focused on getting rid of me quickly, so blinded by her own perceived triumph, that she'd used a standard, uncustomized template, a fatal error in her ruthless efficiency. That clause, that single, innocuous-looking sentence, meant I had the undeniable legal right to examine any document connected to my 15 years of work. Project files, client contracts, financial records. Anything that might contain information Victoria most definitely did not want me to see. For the first time since David's funeral, a slow, grim smile stretched across my lips. Victoria, in her haste and arrogance, had just handed me the keys to her kingdom, and she didn't even realize it. I signed Victoria's contract the next morning, my hand steady, my face a mask of weary resignation that, I hoped, played perfectly into her expectations. But not before I'd spent the entire night tirelessly researching my legal rights, downloading statutes, and meticulously making digital copies of every single relevant document, every contract, every design specification I could find within David's sprawling home office. My background in forensic document analysis, the discipline I had mastered before architecture called to me, was finally, chillingly, going to be useful in ways I had never dared to imagine. As I handed the signed papers back to Victoria in her pristine downtown office, I watched her carefully. Her face, a study in carefully controlled power, visibly relaxed with a triumphant sigh of relief. "Smart choice, Elena," she said, her voice dripping with condescension as she slid a cashier's check for $50,000 across the table, the paper a flimsy symbol of my supposed defeat. "I'll need you out of the house by the end of the month. Isabella wants to put it on the market, and it's easier to show an empty property." She rose, a clear signal that our business was concluded, that I was dismissed. But I remained seated, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in my hand as I pulled out a manila folder of my own. My smile was thin, a carefully constructed facade. "Actually, Victoria," I began, my voice calm, almost conversational, "there's just one more thing. According to Clause 14 of the contract I just signed, I'm entitled to copies of all relevant financial documents related to my work with the company." Victoria's confident, almost smug expression faltered, a flicker of surprise in her sharp blue eyes, before she swiftly recovered her composure, her legal training kicking in. "That's just standard legal language, Elena. It doesn't really apply to your situation." Her tone was dismissive, an attempt to brush me aside. But I had done my homework, meticulously and thoroughly, and I knew better. "Actually, it does apply, Victoria. Especially since my architectural designs, the ones that built Lombardo luxury properties into what it is today, are considered intellectual property. Property that I developed while working for your company. I need complete copies of all project files, every single client contract, and all financial records for every design I worked on during my 15 years here." I opened my folder, sliding it across the table to reveal a meticulously organized list I'd prepared the night before. Dozens of high-profile projects, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, each bearing the unmistakable stamp of my architectural work. my very artistic soul. My lawyer, I lied smoothly, the word feeling surprisingly natural on my tongue, says I have 30 days to review these documents and determine if any of my intellectual property rights were violated, or if there were any financial irregularities involving my designs. Victoria's face went pale, a genuine shock registering in her eyes. It was a fleeting moment, but enough for me to realize I'd just played a card she hadn't even known I held. The truth, of course, was that I didn't have a lawyer yet. That was a detail Victoria didn't need to know. What I did have was a thorough, almost encyclopedic understanding of intellectual property law, hard-earned from my years in forensic document analysis. I knew, unequivocally, that architectural designs could be protected under copyright law, even when created as work for hire, especially if they were innovative and unique. More importantly, a chilling suspicion had been festering in the back of my mind for years, a gnawing unease that now metastasized into absolute certainty. David and his family had been using my designs for far more than just legitimate, high-end real estate development. Over the years, I'd observed subtle, unsettling irregularities in some of our most prestigious projects: shell companies with opaque ownership purchasing properties, buildings that changed hands multiple times for no apparent logical reason, cash buyers who never seemed to actually occupy the opulent luxury condos they had just acquired. At the time, blinded by love and ambition, I'd rationalized it as merely the quirky, often shadowy, nature of Miami's cutthroat international real estate market. Now, a cold, hard truth settled in. I was beginning to suspect that I had been unwittingly designing buildings that actively facilitated massive-scale money laundering. Victoria, her jaw clenched, reluctantly agreed to provide the documents, but her agreement came with rigid, humiliating conditions, an attempt to reassert control. "You can review everything here in the office," she stated, her voice tight with suppressed fury, "during business hours, with one of our legal representatives present at all times. You cannot remove original documents from the premises, and you certainly cannot make copies without our express written permission." I agreed to her terms, my nod outwardly compliant, inwardly seething with a controlled fury. I knew, with absolute certainty, that my real investigation, the true hunt for justice, would happen elsewhere, far from Victoria's watchful, venomous eyes. That same afternoon, I used a portion of Victoria's insulting severance money, the price of my supposed silence, to rent a small, inconspicuous office space in a bland business complex near the airport, a neutral zone far removed from the glittering towers of downtown Miami. It was the perfect covert base. I also immediately contacted Dr. Sarah Kim, a brilliant, no-nonsense forensic accountant I'd worked with extensively during my document analysis days, and asked if she'd be interested in a highly confidential, private consulting project. Sarah had a reputation for unearthing financial secrets, having helped me expose complex insurance fraud schemes in the past. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she would be the perfect, indispensable partner for unraveling the intricate financial mysteries hidden deep within Lombardo Properties records. For the next 2 weeks, the routine was grueling, meticulous, and emotionally draining. Every day, I presented myself at Victoria's conference room, an eager, if somewhat downtrodden, former architect seemingly resigned to her fate. Underneath my facade, however, a forensic mind was working overtime. Armed with a tiny, sophisticated camera hidden discreetly in my purse, I meticulously photographed thousands of documents: ledgers, invoices, contracts, wire transfer records, and project proposals. I memorized every detail that seemed even slightly out of place, every anomaly, every suspicious entry. The legal representative assigned to supervise me was a young, utterly complacent associate named Brad, who spent most of his time engrossed in mobile games, blissfully oblivious to the silent, covert operation unfolding inches from him. His incompetence was my greatest asset. What I discovered, piece by agonizing piece, was even more horrifying than my darkest suspicions had imagined. Lombardo Properties, the empire I had helped build, had been systematically selling luxury condominiums to a labyrinthine network of shell companies. These shell companies, I soon discovered, were controlled by known international drug dealers, South American cartels, and corrupt politicians from across Latin America. My architectural designs, my artistic legacy, were being cynically perverted, weaponized to create buildings specifically tailored for hiding vast sums of illicit assets and facilitating seamless, untraceable money transfers. Properties I had designed with beautiful, ostensibly innocent features, hidden storage spaces, private elevators opening to specific, secluded floors, discrete access points, were in fact sophisticated tools, marketed directly to criminals who needed to launder hundreds of millions of dollars through Miami's seemingly legitimate, glittering real estate market. David, my husband, hadn't just been cheating on me personally. He had been using my artistic vision, my very soul, to help cartels and corrupt officials cleanse their dirty, blood-stained money, all while keeping me completely in the dark. The most damning, soul-crushing evidence came from a series of heavily encrypted emails I unearthed on an old backup drive from David's office. A digital ghost left behind by someone too careless to wipe it completely. The emails were chillingly explicit. They were a clandestine correspondence between David, Nard, Victoria, and Marcus, discussing special clients, a euphemism for their criminal partners, who were willing to pay premium prices for Elena's signature discretion features. They were, with cold calculation, literally marketing my architectural talent, my unique eye for integrated design, to a rogue's gallery of criminals, selling my designs as bespoke tools for money laundering. All this while meticulously ensuring I remained utterly ignorant of who was truly buying our properties and for what nefarious purposes. One email, sent by Victoria to David just 6 months before his sudden death, particularly stood out, sending a jolt of icy terror through me. Elena's getting too curious about the cash buyers. We need to phase her out before she starts asking the wrong questions. Isabella's been patient, but she wants her rightful place in the company. The words were like a physical blow. They hadn't just deceived me. They had planned my ultimate professional and personal demise even before David's heart attack. His sudden death hadn't halted their scheme. It had merely accelerated their timeline for my systematic elimination. By the end of that excruciating month, as I packed my remaining personal belongings, preparing to vacate the Coral Gables mansion, a place that now felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum of lies, I had meticulously assembled a comprehensive, irrefutable dossier on Lombardo Properties, vast and insidious criminal activities. Dr. Sarah Kim's forensic analysis, conducted with quiet intensity in our small, rented office, had unveiled a money laundering operation of truly staggering proportions, exceeding $500 million. My architectural designs, my beautiful creations, served as the sophisticated infrastructure, the very veins and arteries, that made this illicit enterprise possible. But I wasn't ready to go to the authorities yet. Not before I had fully comprehended the sheer scope of the operation. Not before I had identified every single player involved, every complicit individual. More importantly, I harbored a deep, burning need for absolute certainty. When I finally brought down the Lombardo Empire, it would be complete, devastating, and irreversible, leaving no possible avenue for Victoria and Marcus to escape justice. No chance for them to rebuild their corrupt enterprise. As I loaded the last box into my car and took one final, lingering look at the sprawling house where I had once believed I was living my happily ever after, a silent, solemn promise formed on my lips. The Lombardos had underestimated Elena Martinez for the very last time. I rented a modest, almost anonymous apartment in Coconut Grove, a stark contrast to the opulence I'd once called home. For the next 3 months, this unassuming space became my fortress, my command center in a silent war. I immersed myself completely, working 18-hour days fueled by takeout coffee and an unshakable, burning determination. Sarah Kim, my invaluable ally, delved deeper into the intricate web of financial deceit. Her forensic accounting work eventually laid bare the full, sickening scope of the Lombardo operation. Over 24 properties, each bearing the imprint of my designs, had been systematically used to launder money for an unholy alliance of South American drug cartels, Russian oligarchs, and corrupt politicians from across Latin America. The sheer audacity was mind-boggling. The total sum of dirty money cleansed through my architectural creations had ballooned, exceeding $800 million, cementing its place as one of the largest and most sophisticated money laundering operations in South Florida's dark history. But what truly inflamed my anger wasn't just the colossal scale of their crimes. It was the sickening realization that they had perverted my art, twisting the very purpose of structures I designed as homes, as havens, into insidious tools for destroying communities through drug trafficking, violence, and rampant corruption. My creations, my legacy, had been weaponized. The most shocking breakthrough came when Sarah unearthed documents proving that Isabella Rodriguez wasn't just David's long-suffering secret wife, a mere victim. She was, in fact, the registered owner of the primary shell company that controlled the vast majority of the laundered properties. This revelation shattered Victoria's carefully constructed narrative of Isabella as an innocent, aggrieved widow deserving of her inheritance. The truth was far uglier. Isabella was a full, active partner in the sprawling money laundering operation, a knowing participant who had leveraged her legal status as David's legitimate wife to shield their criminal assets from law enforcement scrutiny for decades. The implications were staggering. Victoria's initial offer to buy Isabella's shares suddenly made chilling sense. It wasn't an act of familial loyalty. It was a desperate attempt to consolidate control of the sprawling criminal enterprise under the Lombardo family's direct management, to tie up loose ends and prevent a larger unraveling. They weren't trying to keep the business legitimate and in the family. They were desperately trying to bury their crimes, to hide them from the escalating federal task force that had recently begun investigating Miami's rampant real estate corruption. The layers of deceit seemed endless. I understood then that I needed external help. Over the following weeks, I meticulously cultivated relationships with a network of seasoned investigative journalists at both the Miami Herald and the Sun-Sentinel. I carefully, strategically fed them tantalizing pieces of information, building trust and credibility with each carefully leaked detail. A slow burn of revelations. Simultaneously, I made contact with Agent Rebecca Torres at the FBI's Miami field office, a formidable specialist in financial crimes who, I knew, had been leading the federal investigation into real estate money laundering. Agent Torres was, understandably, initially skeptical of my claims. My story sounded like a jilted lover's revenge fantasy. But when I presented her with the meticulously documented evidence, architectural blueprints detailing hidden compartments, private elevators with discreet access, and specialized construction features specifically designed to facilitate money movement, her skepticism evaporated. She immediately understood the profound significance of what I had uncovered. "Elena," she told me during our tense first meeting, her gaze direct and unwavering, "what you've discovered here could be the key to dismantling multiple, interconnected criminal organizations. But we need to be very careful about how we proceed. These people have killed to protect smaller secrets than this. Your life, Elena, is now in danger." The warning resonated deep within me, a cold confirmation of the stakes. The plan we meticulously developed, with Agent Torres's quiet but firm guidance, was elegant in its simplicity and chilling in its execution. I would approach Victoria with a sophisticated, entirely fake business proposal. My pitch: I had discovered a lucrative, untapped opportunity in the international luxury market, specifically in Central America, and I wanted to partner with Lombardo Properties to develop opulent, discreet properties in Panama and Costa Rica. The proposal would be irresistible to Victoria's insatiable greed. a chance for illicit expansion disguised as legitimate venture. Critically, this audacious proposal would require Victoria to disclose detailed financial information about their existing operations. Information that Agent Torres assured me would provide the probable cause she needed to obtain federal search warrants, striking at the heart of their empire. Meanwhile, the investigative journalists, now primed with carefully vetted information, would publish a series of explosive articles about the pervasive money laundering in Miami real estate, creating immense public pressure for law enforcement action, all without ever revealing me as their source. The timing, Agent Torres stressed, had to be absolutely perfect. Too early, and Victoria would grow suspicious, pulling back. Too late, and the Lombardos might move their vast illicit assets offshore, beyond the reach of justice. Every step was a delicate dance on a razor's edge. I placed the call to Victoria in early December, just as Miami's frenetic social season was hitting its stride, and the city filled with wealthy snowbirds returning from their northern summer homes. I rehearsed my lines, injecting just the right amount of nervous energy and tentative excitement into my voice. A carefully crafted performance designed to disarm her. "Victoria, I hope you're doing well," I began, feigning an awkward pleasantry. And I know we didn't exactly part on the best terms, but I've recently discovered something that I believe could be incredibly profitable for both of us. I then spun my elaborate tale. I'd been cultivating relationships with influential international clients, I implied, who preferred discretion over scrutiny, who were keenly interested in developing bespoke luxury properties in the burgeoning Central American market. I stressed that my architectural reputation, my unique global connections, could open doors that Lombardo Properties, despite its local dominance, couldn't access on its own. "These clients have serious money, Victoria," I emphasized, my voice lowering conspiratorially. "The kind of money that doesn't ask too many questions about paperwork or timelines. I'm talking about $100 million projects that could easily double your annual revenue. Projects that would require a certain level of, shall we say, flexibility." I could practically hear her raw greed through the phone line, a visceral pull towards the promise of unimaginable profits. After a brief, calculated pause, she agreed to meet with me the following week. The trap, meticulously set, was closing. Our meeting took place at the opulent Four Seasons in Brickell, a neutral, impeccably discreet location where Victoria, ever conscious of appearances, would feel safe, secure, and utterly in control, while unknowingly walking headfirst into my meticulously constructed trap. I arrived early, my heart thrumming a frantic rhythm beneath my calm exterior, and strategically positioned myself at a corner table, the perfect vantage point for Agent Torres's discreet surveillance team, who were monitoring our entire conversation through an array of sophisticated directional microphones. Victoria arrived, a vision of power in her customary designer suit and perfectly styled hair, radiating an aura of untouchable confidence. Yet, despite her polished exterior, I noticed new, faint stress lines etched around her eyes, a subtle tremor in her manicured hands as she reached for her water glass. The pressure of running a sprawling criminal empire, it seemed, was finally beginning to take its toll. "Elena, you look good," she said, her fake warmth barely concealing a layer of predatory curiosity. "Moving on from Miami seems to have agreed with you." I offered her a serene, knowing smile and opened my laptop, pulling up a series of stunning, entirely fictional architectural renderings for a portfolio of luxury resorts in Panama City and San Jose. Then these projects, of course, would require significant upfront capital, I explained, my voice laced with a practiced professionalism, but the potential returns could be extraordinary. Imagine the profits, Victoria. However, to truly convince my international investors, who are flying in from Switzerland next month for due diligence meetings, I would need to see detailed financial statements from your existing operations. They need assurance that Lombardo Properties is stable enough for this kind of high-stakes, international partnership. Victoria's eyes, usually cold and calculating, literally lit up with the glow of dollar signs as she devoured my fake proposals, her mind clearly racing with visions of the millions in criminal proceeds she could seamlessly launder through this ingenious Central American real estate development scheme. "This is exactly the kind of international expansion we've been considering," she declared, leaning forward, genuine enthusiasm now overriding her usual guarded demeanor. "It's perfect timing." Her voice was almost breathless with greed. "How quickly would you need our financial documentation, Elena?" "My team can move fast." I pretended to check my calendar, a deliberate pause for dramatic effect, acutely aware that Agent Torres, somewhere nearby, was listening to every single word, every carefully chosen inflection. "My investors are quite particular," I explained, maintaining my professional facade. "If you could provide 5 years of detailed financial records, including all cash transactions and international wire transfers, by, say, mid-February, we could probably have preliminary agreements signed by Valentine's Day. They appreciate efficiency and transparency." Victoria nodded eagerly, her eyes still fixated on the dazzling projections on my screen, oblivious to the fact that she was enthusiastically promising to hand over the exact, irrefutable evidence that would, inevitably, utterly destroy her criminal empire. As we shook hands, her grip firm and confident, sealing our agreement to meet again the following week, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction, deeper and more potent than any architectural achievement I had ever accomplished. Justice, slow and meticulously crafted, was finally within reach. The morning of January 15th dawned clear and cool, a perfect, crisp day for Miami, and an even more perfect one for the meticulously coordinated federal raids that would finally bring down the sprawling Lombardo criminal empire. I watched from the discreet vantage point of my apartment balcony, my heart a complex mixture of dread and exhilaration, as a convoy of unmarked FBI vehicles swarmed the gleaming downtown Lombardo Properties building. Simultaneously, Agent Torres's teams executed a barrage of simultaneous search warrants at Victoria's sprawling Pinecrest mansion, a fortress of opulence, at Marcus's sleek Aventura penthouse, a bachelor pad of illicit gains, and even at Isabella's tranquil Key West estate, the serene facade of her complicity about to shatter. By noon, the news channels were ablaze. Victoria, Marcus, and Isabella were all in federal custody, their carefully constructed lives crumbling around them. Along with them, 24 of their complicit associates and shadowy shell company operators, the cogs in their vast money laundering machine, were rounded up. The Miami Herald's front page the next morning screamed a triumphant headline, "Architect of Corruption: How Luxury Real Estate Became Criminal Empire." The accompanying article, penned by investigative journalist Michael Santos, detailed with chilling precision exactly how my architectural designs, my very artistic vision, had been cynically perverted and weaponized to serve criminal purposes. My decision to cooperate with law enforcement, to risk everything, was unequivocally vindicated. The federal charges leveled against the Lombardo family were devastating, a cascade of severe offenses that painted a grim picture of their systematic criminality. They faced counts of conspiracy to commit money laundering, racketeering, wire fraud, and massive tax evasion, compounded by additional, graver charges related to facilitating international drug trafficking and the corruption of foreign officials. Victoria, who had always prided herself on being the sharpest, the most cunning mind in any room, had, with breathtaking arrogance, walked directly into my carefully laid trap. By greedily providing the detailed financial records I had requested, she had unwittingly supplied the irrefutable evidence that meticulously proved every single aspect of their sprawling criminal operation. The documents she had handed over, hoping to secure a new avenue for illicit gains, contained a treasure trove of damning information: meticulous records of cash transactions, unequivocal wire transfers to known international criminal organizations, and chilling communications with cartel representatives that left no shred of doubt about their nefarious intentions. When Agent Torres later led me through the cavernous evidence room, a scene of ordered chaos filled with boxes of seized documents and confiscated hard drives, I felt a profound, almost cathartic sense of closure. It wasn't just for myself, for the betrayal I had endured, but for all the countless communities that had been ravaged by the drugs, violence, and corruption that had flowed, sickeningly, through the very buildings I had unknowingly designed. The civil asset forfeiture proceedings commenced almost immediately, a swift and merciless arm of justice. Federal prosecutors sought to seize a staggering sum, over $900 million in criminal proceeds, a sum that included every single property that had been involved in the vast money laundering operation. This meant that Isabella Rodriguez, David's true legal wife, despite any desperate, last-ditch claims of innocence or victimhood she might have made, lost absolutely everything: her luxurious Key West estate, her comfortable monthly payments, and her entire life of ease and privilege, a life built entirely on blood money, vanished overnight. More importantly for me, on a deeply personal and professional level, it meant that my intellectual property rights, the very essence of my creative work, were finally and unequivocally being respected. The federal court meticulously ruled that since my architectural designs had been used, without my knowledge or consent, for sophisticated criminal purposes, I was legally entitled to substantial compensation from the vast trove of forfeited assets. The settlement I eventually received, a sum far greater than Victoria's paltry offer, wasn't just about money. It was about something far more profound. It was about official, undeniable recognition that I had been a victim, not a co-conspirator, and that my artistic vision, my integrity, deserved protection and vindication, even when it had been so cruelly perverted by ruthless criminals. It was a reclaiming of my professional soul. Victoria's trial began 6 months later, a high-profile media spectacle that gripped Miami. I stood tall as the prosecution's star witness, my voice steady, my testimony unwavering, detailing with meticulous clarity how the Lombardo family had systematically deceived me about David's marriage, while simultaneously exploiting and weaponizing my designs to facilitate their sprawling web of crimes. Sitting in that federal courtroom, my gaze sweeping across the courtroom to meet Victoria's eyes, now hardened, bitter, and utterly devoid of her former smugness, her once immaculate designer suits replaced by the stark orange jumpsuit of a federal inmate. I felt the final, crucial pieces of my long, arduous healing process falling into place. The woman who had, with such cold arrogance, tried to humiliate me with a paltry $50,000 and threatened to utterly destroy my hard-earned career, was now facing the crushing reality of life in federal prison. When the judge delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts, Victoria's carefully constructed composure finally, spectacularly, shattered. She broke down, a desperate, guttural sob echoing through the silent courtroom, as the full, undeniable weight of her catastrophic situation finally hit her. Marcus received a sentence of 25 years. Isabella, despite her late-stage cooperation with prosecutors, was handed 15 years behind bars, and Victoria, the architect of so much deceit, was sentenced to a chilling 30 years without any possibility of parole. Justice, unyielding and absolute, had been served. But my story, Elena Martinez's story, doesn't end with their convictions. It begins anew. Using the substantial settlement from the asset forfeiture case, I established the Elena Martinez Foundation for Ethical Architecture. This foundation became my new passion, my new purpose, dedicated to a vital mission: preventing the exploitation of architectural designs for criminal purposes and providing crucial support for professionals who, like me, have been victimized by complex white-collar crime. I also proudly returned to practicing architecture, but with a profoundly transformed vision. My work now focuses exclusively on projects that genuinely improve communities rather than potentially harming them. Affordable housing developments that offer dignity, vibrant community centers that foster connection, and innovative schools in underserved neighborhoods throughout South Florida. The foundation, under my guidance, has already helped expose 3 other insidious money laundering operations, recovering over $200 million in stolen assets, proving beyond a doubt that one person's unwavering determination to seek justice, to reclaim their integrity, can have impacts far beyond their individual case, rippling outwards to create profound, positive change. Looking back on everything that happened, the years of deception, the shattering revelations, the arduous fight for justice, I sometimes find myself wondering if David ever truly loved me, or if, from the very beginning, I was merely a useful, unsuspecting tool in his sprawling criminal enterprise. The truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. That question, once so agonizing, has lost its power over me. What truly matters now, what defines me, is this. I refuse to let Victoria and her family destroy me. I refuse to let their lies define my worth. Instead, I channeled my profound pain, my searing anger into an unshakable purpose. I leveraged my unique skills and hard-won knowledge not only to dismantle their corrupt empire, but also to protect countless other potential victims from experiencing the devastating betrayal I endured. Every single morning, when I wake up in my new home, a beautiful, bright townhouse in the vibrant design district that I bought with my own money, meticulously decorated with my own designs, a true sanctuary of reclaimed self-worth, I remind myself of a powerful, undeniable truth. Justice isn't just about punishment for criminals. Real justice, true liberation, is about rebuilding your life on your own terms, using your talents to make the world a little bit better, and never, ever again allowing anyone to make you feel like you're worth only $50,000 and a meaningless signature on a non-disclosure agreement. The FBI came knocking on their door because Elena Martinez refused to disappear quietly, refused to be silenced, refused to be erased, and because sometimes the most dangerous person to underestimate, the most formidable force, is a woman who has lost everything and has absolutely nothing left to lose except her integrity. And that, I realized with a quiet, profound certainty, was the one thing they could never, ever take away from me.